Hey there, Crypto Street listeners. Our episode today is sponsored by Pantepic.com. Pantepic is a new messaging app that aims to free you from distractions like news feeds and advertisements and allows you to contact people you want to contact without any other distractions. Check them out at pantepic.com/podcast. Some of the features of this: location sharing, group chat. If you have more than one friend, you can chat with them. Audio and video messaging, all in HD. Self-destructing messages. You can send a message and have it explode or disappear if it's not read within 10 seconds, 30 minutes, what have you. You can schedule messages to fit around your schedule. What a concept, messaging around real life other than the other way around. So I think this is a cool product. Check them out at pantepic.com/podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's go.
Round one, fight.
Thank you for tuning in to the Crypto Street Podcast. Here are your hosts, Killer Whale, Prince, and Crypto Dale.
And remember to tip your waitress.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to Crypto Street Podcast. This is Crypto Dale, formerly known as Crypto Dale, now Dale of Crypto. Thanks, Twitter. Joined tonight with, we're two-man in it. Prince is off doing his Canada thing, coaching some hockey boys. So we'll do without him, try to. But as always, I'm joined with my man, Killer. What's up, Killer? Well, how you doing?
Hey, buddy. It's good to be back here. It's been a little bit since we sat down and recorded. We had a crazy busy schedule for a while there and then took a little bit of time off. But yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, it was a much-needed vacation. I know, unfortunately, you were the only one that was still grinding hard at work while Prince and I were off gallivanting, so to say. But yeah, we busted. We worked pretty hard the week before and got, still released some episodes. So hope everyone enjoyed them. Pretty pumped about tonight's guest. He's formerly of GM and BitTorrent. Currently, he's the CEO of Everest. Bob Reid joining us tonight. So, Bob, thanks for taking the time. Glad we could catch you out on an airplane, like you said. So, for joining us and talk a little bit about Everest. How we doing tonight?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Let's just talk. I see on here I know people are probably thinking formerly of GM. Let's talk. How did you get into crypto? What was it that drew you to it?
Sure. So I was the general manager of licensing at BitTorrent. BitTorrent being the inventor of the peer-to-peer protocol. That's I would call the grandfather of a lot of blockchain and some of the ideas. So we were doing the transport layer with 170 million active monthly users and moving about 11% of the entire internet. Had ambitions at the time I was there of actually going up from transport up the stack to CPU and storage, where we could actually do what looks like today Filecoin, and CPU is if-then statements being basically Definity or wannabe Ethereum. And so that's sort of where I got my bug for crypto. We could see it all at the time. This was back in 2012, 13, 14. And then from there, actually, I went on to help a platform and a group in Singapore called Kai Labs. Sort of we call them an accelerator and think tank. And the same guys that brought Vitalik from Ethereum over to Singapore for the Singaporean government. So that was just a fascinating experience to work with, Primavera from Harvard, who's done some of the seminal work on governance, Aya from Kraken at the time, now the Ethereum Foundation, and some of the other guys from Ethereum. And that, I got more committed at the time.
Sure. So let's move on into Everest. As the CEO of Everest, let's maybe start with a high-level overview for the listeners on what Everest is. If you go to their website, everest.org, the first thing that stands out to me is in the biggest font says financial technologies elevating humanity. So let's just dive right in if you want to take that.
Sure. So why don't I tell you what it is, and then I'll tell you kind of why it matters.
Perfect.
So we started, Everest is comprised of, I call it 3 products or elements. EverID, which is biometric digital identity that also incorporates government IDs and all third-party attestations. The second element is that identity makes up a wallet, and the wallet is multi-currency, both fiat and crypto. And then the third component we call Everchain, which is a layer 2 transaction chain, sort of that is able to scale to massively scalable transactions cost effectively, and then ultimately post onto mainnet so that you get the auditability and credibility of the open mainnet.
It's a very ambitious project. I was reading through the white paper, and when I first started reading, I was thinking, oh, this is a platform for maybe business to business transmission, remittances, things like that, money transfer. But as I got deeper into it, it's really a project, I think, aimed at largely banking the unbanked, or not banking, I shouldn't say that, but giving exposure to all of these emerging markets people who don't have verifiable identities and thus can't participate in the traditional financial sector.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. It is nothing short of an attempt to re-architect part of the global economy. And we had to start, if you get into an economy and what it really makes it up, you get into value transfer. And the way to do value transfer, as I call it, on the atomic layer of an economy, is truly identity. Are you who you say you are, and will you do what you say you're going to do? And by starting at the atomic layer, we were able to start bridging out a platform that takes emerging markets, frontier markets, where there isn't really very good identity or very good trust in systems, and build an architecture that enables literally billions of people to actually come into the 21st century digital economy.
And the implications for that on the economy as a whole would be pretty massive too, because that's a lot of people.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We did a back of the envelope estimate. I'll give you a sense. G8 has about 50% of global GDP. G9 through 25 has about the next 23%-ish. G26 to 184 or 190, depending on how you count, makes up about 27% of the global economy. And yet that's about 40% of the population. So there's a disparity there of those people not actually being able to be productive enough, or their economy is not productive enough. And that is in the tunes of, if you were to have those people actually represent what a G20 could do, you would see, you would be having several $1 trillion, like tens of trillions of dollars economy going over it.
Yeah, and it's sort of the thing where it's a sort of system where people aren't able to get ahead because they're cut off from opportunities that people who are already more well off have access to. I mean, the accredited investor rule, I think, is a good example of that, and this is on a much broader scale than that. But it's really kind of amazing what this technology could enable, or what blockchain technology could enable with a project like this.
Yeah, I've explained it to a few investors, and it resonated well. It's the why now question, and the answer is metaphorically, it's like an Uber moment. You couldn't actually do Uber until there were GPS chips in 90% of the phones, right? But as soon as that happened, a brand new industry is possible. Now, what we're looking at is the simultaneous convergence of mass market biometrics that are actually cost effective to actually produce, along with cloud technology, and blockchain technology with smart contracts and tokenization of money. Now, with those two things coming together, you literally can, for the first time ever in human history, start banking the unbanked. You can actually give them a ladder up out of the 7th century economy to the 21st century economy. They can transfer value. They can get loans. They can actually interact in a real economy.
Yeah, you mentioned the tokenization. Can you walk us through the token system really briefly? I know there are two sets of tokens. There's ID and CRDT, or credit. Maybe just explain a little bit about that, because everybody's interested in the token. It's the big thing that gets everybody interested in the first place, I think so. So maybe walk us through that system and how that works.
Sure. So utility token, the ID token is first, it's minted. We've actually already sold some already. And it is a standard access token or membership. And you have different levels of membership depending on if you want to get the SDK, get the API, send $5 or send $1 billion, right? And we've got about 15 different levels of access. So the important piece is, if you will, it's known, it's already built. All the money we raise actually goes to, actually qualifies as a utility token in most jurisdictions. Now, inside of the system, that's just access to the network. An organization like an NGO, a bank, a government, or a sender of a remittance would still have to pay a very small fee to actually accomplish something like verify an identity or send money. And those we actually charge in what we call credits. And credits are literally US dollars, just a digital version of it. Now, what we've done here is give you an example. If a large organization wants to move $1 billion over our platform, we might charge them, to use a simple math equation, 5%. So we would take $50 million in revenue, and we would turn around and give our users about 5 million of that, maybe up to 10 million, right? And we give that to them in credits. And what we do is we keep a reserve of that 5 to 10 million in our bank account in case they want to redeem those credits for fiat currency. And it's all, since it's pegged to the US dollar, literally sitting in our reserves, it's a stable coin.
I was just going to say, so to me, it's like ID gives you the initial access while credit is fueling the operations. I remember from the white paper, the comparison of credits to this blockchain or this system being similar to Ethereum being used as gas for transactions on the Ethereum platform.
Sure, the analogy can be made for that.
One thing I noticed that I wanted to ask you about is the project it's had its inception since, I think the idea was formed in 2016. How has crypto changed from that point until now? And it seems like you were probably involved even before 2016, but how have you seen it change over the past, let's say, 4 years?
Sure. So my co-founder and I were working on a few different dApps. And every time we sort of arrived at the right business model and case, it all became dependent on verifiable identity. And we assumed for a while that governments or some institution would be taking care of this. And it led us to the point that truly no one was going to be taking care of it, and no one was going to be taking care of it in the way that it needs to be taken care of. And that identity will go digital. It's going to be slow. And right now we're on a path where large institutions own that data, not the user. So we made a very conscious effort to, one, do biometrics, because that's actually critical in emerging markets. Two, it actually has to be user-owned. So not self-sovereign, which is permissions on everybody else's database, but they own their own database. And then the third piece we did that was intentional was to actually make this available not just on a smartphone, but actually in the cloud, right? So that is, a user could walk up to a webcam and actually be able to scan their face or fingers, in our case, and be able to get access to their wallet. So we started with very much an identity focused, because in economic development circles, ID is the operating system of an economy. Like you literally, that's the key. We knew it always came with a wallet. The transaction piece, we knew we had to deal with at some point, because most of the main nets out there don't process what a real economy requires in terms of speed, price, scale. And so what we did is we ended up evolving towards the middle of 2017 to make sure that we had a wallet that was multi-currency and this massively scalable transaction chain.
I was just going to ask if you can dive a little bit more into the biometrics section, explain how that works in terms of how it contributes to the ID being formed and how it functions when an ID is requested.
So you can think of your identity as multiple data sources or metadata that you can accumulate and attest that you are you, right? So I can get my telco and power company to say that I actually have this address. I can get LinkedIn and Facebook to give me some social attestation, and I can get my employer and other folks to say I'm really me. Then I can also scan in a passport or a driver's license. or in most countries, a voter ID card or national ID card. All these are sort of, if you will, layers of, proving to other institutions or other people that you are who you say you are. All of those are good, but none of them actually get into literally the carbon that is a unique human being. And that's why biometrics are so important inside of the identity world. Now, again, like digital identity and identity management has been around for hundreds of years, and biometrics just happened to be something that the identity industry adopted along the way because it simply works. You get deduplication. That is, if I show up at the bank and I say I'm really John, they can know. That's by fingerprints and face scans and voice and DNA and such. So we made biometrics, I would call it at the core of our identity, and wrapping in government, third-party, social attestations, et cetera, around to create, I'd call it layers of the onion approach on what an identity is.
Bobby, you guys on your website have 7 use cases. Let's just touch maybe on a little that you guys are focusing on, to really hone in first, and maybe waterfall everything else after that.
Sure. So the easiest one to explain is usually cash transfer. And cash transfer is another way of saying somewhere between 10 and 40% of government expenditures. Like, here's your health subsidy. Here's your unemployment insurance. Here's your energy voucher to go get energy, for example. Right. It is in the trillions of dollars in terms of size of it. And what most folks have found out over the past few decades is that there's massive leakage, right? When you move $5 billion, $10 billion to 100 million people that are not well off, you end up with friction and leakage where you're missing estimates range from 25 to 50%, right? And I don't want to say it's corruption, because it's not always. A lot of it just simply gets not efficiently used. So historically, up until literally like the last couple of years, the way to distribute that has been duffel bags and shotguns. Like that's that. Like, let's roll a truck. We have some insurance. Here's some agents that are employees, and they literally have money, cash. Some of the new techniques are handing out ATM cards, and we're finding that that's not working anywhere on the planet. Right? That is, most of the case study literature out there will point out that if someone's not well off, they will take that ATM card and they'll sell it for 1 month of cash, and then somebody else will walk away with it, and they'll get all the next 10 months worth coming to their ATM. They're finding that the banks like the replacement value and the upkeep and the whatever. It's just kind of an expensive way to go about managing this. And so none of these things really solve the bigger problem. And so what our solution does, again, getting back to the 3 components, is you can imagine moving, to be a very real scenario, a $7 billion a year energy subsidy to 50 million people. It's about $15 a month. You got to send to a bunch of people that need gas to cook with. And they're missing a couple of $1 billion right now. Now, with our solution, they send over our chain, and this is a cryptographically signed transaction. Again, we post onto mainnet to make sure it's all auditable. It goes into a wallet that is not only on device, but actually accessible from a webcam or a fingerprint reader. And then the user would scan their face or their fingerprint, or both, and then collect either their gas or their money. Now, that's 100% verification on the identity and 100% validation on the transaction. So you didn't lose a couple of $1 billion when you moved this across, right? And just to geek out with you for a sec, like, you can tokenize that money so that it can only be used in conditional cash. Like, it can only be used for gas. It can only be used for medical uses and only redeemed by the clinic. It can only be used by refugees in a certain region, for example. I can go on and on. So blockchain and biometrics actually solve a massive problem here.
One thing that really intrigues me on this is the whole land piece. And that's probably because I deal with a lot of mortgages and title opinions, all that good stuff. So that's going to be pretty intriguing to watch how you guys progress forward with that piece.
Yeah, this was one that was case. Yeah, this was brought to us by a partner that's doing land on the blockchain, and what they found was actually saying, here's a land title and put it on an immutable ledger. That's actually technically not very hard. It's also not terribly relevant. It's helpful, but it's not great. And what they came to us for was, hey, can you scan in the GPS coordinates and scan in the land title and then attach it to an identity? Now, once you have an identity attached with the title and the GPS, now that's bankable. That's an actual bank. You can actually do a mortgage on that. But without that identity, it's sort of prove that you actually have that title on the chain.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, that's and by the way, like it's actually like you get into emerging markets, property is it's one of the top 2 or 3 things they care about. It solves a lot. I mean, it's the basis for private property, the basis for modern capitalism.
There's no one's making any more of it.
No, they're not.
One of the biggest things I saw is while reading the white paper, I was thinking of challenges for the project, and something that sprung to mind, and I this is probably a challenge for every single project, but scaling, because it's very ambitious. At its peak, if it's doing what it aims to do, then it'll probably be processing a ton of transactions. Would you agree with that? It's scaling, or what are you guys running into, I guess?
On the scaling piece, or I would call in the digital world, we actually feel quite confident about what we have architecturally and where we're at, right? So I'll give you a sense. Like we modeled after the Indian economy, which has 1 billion people, right? And they do the neighborhood of, it's a couple 100 billion transactions a month. That includes identity verification and the actual transaction after you verify an identity. You need to do the transaction in, kind of like Visa or MasterCard, 3 to 5 seconds. Has to be for a fraction of a penny, and it needs to be secure, like biometrically verified. And so we made sure we could handle what I call a real economy. And those are 4 parameters or variables that just don't change. So it's worthy of note, like we've taken blockchain technology and applied it to a real economy. We're not actually talking about the blockchain economy. We're talking about real economies. So again, the digital piece, we actually feel quite good about. The challenges I think we're going to find will be working actually in the field and getting users onboarded efficiently, which you'll see a lot of our partnerships that we're about to announce are with big institutions that will help us onboard those users.
Yeah, I was thinking another thing is probably security has got to be paramount, right? If the decentralized entity is storing all these different metrics, aiding towards identification and verification of identities. But that's something that probably wasn't even possible to do that really in a secure way prior to blockchain, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone historically, even to date right now, uses centralized databases for identity management. And, do we have to mention Equifax? Aadhaar in India is getting hacked about every 2 to 3 months. You get internal actors that will go in and do nefarious things and cache data in regions it's not supposed to be. It's, so decentralizing the data itself is the first big step. Giving users the ownership over that data is, I think, the second big step. And so those are pieces that I think are, to your point, pretty new with the blockchain that you just simply couldn't do previously.
Bob, I see on the roadmap, you guys looks like you appear to have a big, Everest 1.0 goes live in October. So let's just, as we wrap up here, let's talk about the roadmap. How's everything progressing on that? How's everything looking as far as what's out there?
Good question. So I'll give you the history, which will lead up to where we're headed and what we've done. So in January, we demonstrated this actually at the United Nations and some of the Bretton Woods institutions in Washington, D.C. We followed up by actually building the prototype, a little bit more robust in May, and then actually installing the alpha version inside of one of the largest banks on the planet in end of June, beginning of July. So if you will, tokens are minted, wallets are out there, functional, usable blockchain actually running. So where we're at now is we're actually, I would call it, making sure the security is more robust. We're debugging the app, and we're actually headed out into, you'll see field pilots from us starting in October in South Asia. So we've announced already the Ministry of Health of Cambodia, and you'll see 3 or 4 other announcements from us here in the next 4 weeks of really large institutions that are going to be deploying us in October, November, December. That's all on track.
Good deal.
Yeah. So where we end up at the end of the road is we look like a financial services company. So we will need some licenses or partner with licenses for money transmits, banking deposits, effectively Vostro Nostro accounts. I think that's the end of the road for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree there. Kind of solidifies everything and the use cases and all that good stuff. So he is Bob Reid, the CEO of Everest. Bob, thanks so much for taking the time, explaining everything. Encourage everyone to get out, check it out, everest.org. Bob, do you have any final words before we end the show?
Just thanks for the time, and if you will believe it or not, this actually is possible. I think we actually can save the world and make $1 trillion all at the same time.
All in this together, aren't we?
We kind of are. No one's getting out of this alive.
That's exactly right. Take it easy, killer. Thanks everyone for listening. This was a Crypto Street Podcast, episode 92. We're approaching that, the big pivotal 100 episode. Hopefully everyone will be ready for that. We got some cool things going for that. So tip that waitress. Take it easy, guys. Be nice to each other. Peace out.